Welcome in. It's 125 days straight of Clippers talk. Don't I look like it? I'm Adam Osland. Welcome back into another episode here on the YouTube side. And now we do have Clippers Talk OT. If you want to find that on the Spotify or any app that you use to podcast with, you can find these extra episodes there. Coming to you after the Clippers blew a 22-point lead last night at Intuit Dome to the Indiana Pacers. But for more on the big picture bird's eye view of this team, let's bring in our friend. It's Eric Pincus and his brain. Eric Pincus, NBA capologist of the people, is joining me here on Clippers Talk now. He's at Eric Pincus, Pincus on X is where you find him. Eric, thanks for putting up with me. How you doing?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on. Always happy to talk.
Yeah, just ignore the cats. This is going to happen, apparently. They're most active when I'm doing a podcast for whatever reason. They want to get involved, steal some screen time. Okay, so this Clippers team obviously made a couple of moves yesterday. Let's start with that. Bogdan Bogdanovic was brought in from the Atlanta Hawks plus 3 second-round picks. They send Terrence Mann and Bones Highland that way. How do you view this move from an on-court talent point of view, and then also big picture where the contracts are? Because it looks like Bogey's only signed through next season. Terrence Mann has a 3-year extension after this year.
Yeah, there's a lot to it. I could see if you're a fan of Terrence Mann that you're not happy, but on the other hand, you got a nice player. So you lose a player, you gained a player. Also Bones Highland's in the deal. I don't think he was important to the big picture for the Clippers. It was probably his last year with the team. So if you're just looking at the difference in players, you went younger to older, so that's potentially negative. But at the same time, you got a better offensive player in Bogdanovic, a better shooter, a better scorer, a guy who can do very similar things in the case of like Terrence, where they could kind of create, but they're not point guards. I know Mann played some point for them. I know Mann played some point in college, but he was never really like the creator for this team, at least at a high level. And you're not going to get that same kind of creation, but you can give the ball to Bogdanovic and he can do things. He can create. He can be your primary creator, but he's not a point guard. And then he's also just a better shooter. And he's, I would say, very different in that he wants to score and he wants to shoot.
Yeah.
And Mann literally, I mean, I can't speak for him, but from externally watching him, looked like he never wanted to shoot, never wanted to score. And he had such a big explosive playoff game that I think that this is what he could be kind of was placed on him by the external world and probably the Clippers themselves, where, okay, we just got to get him to be that guy all the time, and it's just not who he is. Bogdanovic is more likely to get you 20 points in a game. He's not going to be as good a defender as Mann, and that's fine. This is a team that's super scrappy, that already has that defensive grit, that just needed more shooting, more offense, a guy who can help spread the floor a little bit better for Kawhi and for James. But I'll just say that one last little point on the players. I was at the Lakers Clippers, and I just was like, I remember watching a play where
Great game.
Not for the Clippers, that was rough.
Oh my God.
But the ball swung. The Lakers, I don't think I've ever seen the Lakers this year play defense quite as well as they did that game. Their rotations were just absolutely inspired. But there was a rotation where, they want Mann to be the one to shoot the open shot. He had the open shot. He passes it up, forces it, a pass to someone else who's guarded, who shoots a guarded three instead of an open man three. And even though the Lakers want Mann to be the one taking that three, that's the issue with Mann that I think they faced that hurt in the spacing of who they are with what they're supposed to be moving forward. Now you go with somebody who's going to take that shot every time, whether he should or shouldn't, he's going to take that shot. So a different style player. As far as length, he does have a team option, Bogdanovic. So he's this year, he's next year, and then the year after, which is 26-27, he does have a $16 million team option. So entirely up to the team whether or not they want that contract for that year.
Okay. So they could save some money there. We'll see how things work out. I'm a big fan of Bogey. I've been a fan since he was in Sacramento because what he did to the Lakers, he used to torment them a little bit. So you got a Laker hater on this team, not just on this podcast now. But they also send out KPJ, and they got Beauchamp from the Milwaukee Bucks. Is this something where KPJ, I think had a player option for next year, and Beauchamp has an expiring, so they could free up a little bit more money this offseason?
Yeah, I mean, if you don't want KPJ back, this was the time to get out of him, and it's a minor move. I mean, there were times he did things. I saw some games where he'd give him 20 points or so, but like realistically, he was a stopgap, and I think they saw like, okay, Dunn is a better player for who we are as the Clippers, for what we want to be, than KPJ. Dunn is not as good of a scorer, but he's a better teammate and a better role player and a better defender who can also score a little bit. You're going to get more individual, like, okay, KPJ scored 20 tonight, but was it a meaningful 20? And maybe it would be, but by and large, I think over time you're going to get a more consistent performance out of Dunn in terms of who the Clippers want to be and what they are. And then Beauchamp has never really taken off. The Clippers can keep him if he ends up being a nice prospect for them. They can keep him either cheap at the minimum. They cannot pay him more than 4.78, which is what his declined option was. He's a first-round pick. His option wasn't picked up by Milwaukee, and so I don't think that's a fear. I don't think that's a worry that he comes in, blows up, and someone offers him $10 million. I think that maybe that's like a Jake LaRavia issue potentially, who is like, they declined his option, but he's popping a bit. Whereas Beauchamp, I'm not going to say that with the right accent.
I'm seeing on Basketball Reference just Beauchamp, so I'm going with it for now.
All right, Marjan. No, I'm not going to say. I don't know. MB, the kid they got from the Bucks. I pulled for him. I liked his story when he was drafted, and he was also buried in Milwaukee. And I don't think they've done a tremendous job with player development. So he'll have a few months to work. Maybe he won't play much, but maybe show the coaching staff that he's somebody who is an NBA player. I don't know if he is or isn't. He hasn't shown that he is, but maybe he can show them something in practice that they're want to invest in developing.
Now, a couple days prior to the trade deadline at noon Pacific time yesterday, they made a move where they brought in Drew Eubanks and Patty Mills and gave up PJ Tucker and Mo Bamba and a second-round pick. Obviously, they got 3 seconds back from Atlanta in the bogey deal with Terrence Mann. How do you value Drew Eubanks? Because last night he got some more serious minutes out there that weren't just the end of the game against the Lakers when they were down by 25. And he looked good. He's younger than Mo Bamba, or he's a little bit older, but he's definitely more spry. He moves like a guy that has more of a motor than Mo Bamba is what I should say.
Right.
How do you see him as a player for this Clippers team?
Well, I mean, Mo Bamba was sort of the casualty of the Clippers needing to rework their books a little bit. And they got under the luxury tax, which I had talked to a lot of people around the league, and just talking to them about the Clippers, there was a lot of debate as to whether the Clippers would get under. And any team operating where the Clippers are would get under because there's no reason not to. There's a repeater tax that it's good to get out from, and you need to be out, whatever. The problem is, the question is does Steve Ballmer care? You know what I mean? Like, does he care about money? And so other teams weren't sure if the Clippers would do it, but it made all the sense in the world. And Mo Bamba, I like Mo. He had one good year in Orlando, hasn't really popped. And what Eubanks is I would say limited skill, maximum effort. And I think Clipper fans can get behind that. Like, if you're not great, but you try hard and play hard all the time, that'll go further than someone being like super talented and not putting their heart into what they do. So I think Clipper fans, they're going to like him off the bench. He is a valuable player more in his contract than necessarily what he does on the court. I mean, as a backup, he's good as you're going to get from like Daniel Tice. Remember, he played pretty well for the Clippers.
Yeah.
Probably can't do as much on offense, but that kind of player. But what Drew has is a $4.8 or $4.75 million contract next year, or he's under contract for that amount next year, but it's all non-guaranteed, and the cut down date is January the 7th. So they have, the Clippers, a lot of time to use him as a trade piece. And as we've covered, we've talked about before in other conversations, and I've talked many times about these aprons, which are complex and confusing for a lot of people. Main thing is that if you take back more than you send out, in salary, you're going to have a first apron hard cap. When you have a player like Eubanks, you can guarantee a portion of his salary. So if the Clippers need to send out, say, $12 million, and they combine a few dudes, and you need to guarantee 2.5 of Eubanks, you call up his agent and say, "Hey, we'd like to give your guy 2.5 more guaranteed money than he had." The agent's going to be happy, even if they're getting traded, because that's $2.5 million more than they were promised to get. And so by doing that, the Clippers have what is a very valuable, flexible contract when it comes to trades, and usually an off-season kind of move. Could be in the middle of the season. Certainly too early to start to peg what's next big picture for the Clippers. James Harden is the next big question because he's got a player option. But Eubanks could be a valuable piece, and you have team control. They didn't have team control on Kevin Porter Jr. While his money wasn't a lot, it was on the books, and he has some off-court stuff that I would say most of the league won't touch. There's a lot of teams I talk to who are like, I wouldn't have him on my team on a minimum contract. No interest. Those are, I don't want to say that like when the legal system has adjudicated and the person should be able to earn, and I'm not going to say that when someone has these domestic situations that they shouldn't earn. So that's not for me to say. I do know that if it was my team, I would have a hard time going that direction. And the Clippers made the choices they made, and they got out of them. And I think that was the right move because I don't think he helped the team as much. When you start to factor in all of these pieces, in, out, flexibility, I thought the Clippers did pretty well. Plus, I'll say one last thing is that like they did sell low on Mann's contract because after the last couple of years, they probably could have gotten a first in a previous year, and instead they got multiple seconds. But like multiple seconds in Bogdanovich, I mean, you can cry over, oh, you didn't get a first, but a first is mostly a mystery box. It's either a player that you probably get who probably doesn't hit because most players don't hit, and it's more about getting another piece to trade. Picks are more about trading for something else. So, yeah, they don't have as many firsts to trade because they didn't get a first for Mann when they could have, but they also have Bogdanovich, who is a nice player. So there's no moves without risk. They believed in Mann. They gave him an extension. They wanted him to be a part of what they did. But as the team evolved, it kind of didn't work the way they had hoped with Mann as a starter. He became a good bench player and still a contributor and really a valuable part of what they do on defense. But I kind of like what Amir Coffey's doing. And he kind of does what Mann does.
Yeah.
And, yeah, Coffey's not under contract, and they have to work that out. But, it's not the best. It's not the best that they didn't get a first. But if you like Bogdanovich, and I think Clipper fans will, I kind of like it. So where you are now, I like the move. Looking back and saying, well, they could have got a first if they traded him earlier, what's done is done. You have to make the choices and live with them.
We got Eric Pincus on, NBA capologist and analyst here on Clippers Talk. Follow him at Eric Pincus, Pincus on X. So moving forward here, explain to me the buyout situation and when guys start to become available. Can anyone be bought out right now? Does it take a process of days to be waived? Like, how does that work? Because everybody's talking about Ben Simmons possibly coming to the Clippers.
Well, I mean, you can waive anybody in the NBA. The Lakers can waive Luka. It's legal.
And Nico Harrison probably thought about it.
So these things are you could just what you do is you have a guaranteed contract, and then you have the ability to cut them. But if they have guaranteed money, you are obligated to pay that money. So in the case of the Nets, let's say that they have Ben Simmons at $40 million, 40.3. And if he were to get waived today, and then let's say it does take a couple of days to clear waivers. So if they're waived today, maybe he'd be 8-9. He'd be free on the 9th at I think 2 p.m. our time in LA or 5 p.m. on the the East Coast.
Oh, Clippers pick him up right before kickoff. Let's go.
Yeah. So if you were to prorate it, so let's say that let's just put in the 10th. I have the 10th punched in already. Let's say it's the 10th. He would get from the Clippers, prorated about rest of the season, yeesh, there's a lot of time. It's not bad. 1.2 million. He would hit their books because of certain rules on a 1-year deal. He'd hit their books at 755, 756K. So let's say that he's getting. Let's round it down. Let's just round it to $1 million. The Nets would probably say to Ben Simmons, find a home, and he's doing that right now. We'll pay you $39 million instead of $40 million. We're just rounding. And so now Ben Simmons gets 39 from the Nets, and he gets $1 million from the Clippers. And now he gets 40. He gets the same money that he would have gotten anyway. That's usually how a buyout works. And the Nets are responsible on their books at this point for $39 million. That's what hits their books. For the Clippers, even though he's getting paid, assuming this is a 1-year minimum deal, and it could be a little different if it was like a 1+1 with an option. But let's just go super simple and say it's a 1-year deal. It would hit the Clippers books at about we'll call it 750. It's a little bit more than that. And it depends on the day because it changes day to day. If you add 750 to the Clippers right now, that would put them still under the tax by, we'll call it about $1 million. It's a little more. So
they're almost $2 million under the luxury tax?
Yeah, I have them at 1.9, and that's I'll double check that because I was just updating my sheets as we speak. The trades are actually still being processed by the league. I don't know if they've gotten to all of them yet. I know that most of them are done. Yeah, they're 1.9 million under the tax right now. So
that's the most they can pay him and stay under it, basically.
Well, no, they can't pay him 1.9 because, well, let me think. What do they have?
Let me ask you this, because I've been hearing they still have mid-level exception money over from what they gave to DJ this past season.
Yeah, they do, but it starts to prorate down. Okay. So they used their biannual on Batum. They used their mid-level on Derek. They had 3.3 million. My calc says they have about 2.7 of it left today.
Okay.
So if I go to my other calculator, and let's say that they're doing this on the 10th, and they're using what's left of their mid-level. Let's see. Oh boy.
So Monday, okay.
Signing amount, I got to punch that in. Let's put in let's just round it to 2.7. Well, no, because it's going to be a different number by then. So, yeah, I'd have to punch that in. Let's just round it down to say it's 2 million. It's going to be more than 2 million. That would actually hit their books at 2 million. And so because of this tax thing, they probably wouldn't use all the 2 million. They would probably use up to, say, 1.8 of it. And maybe you want a little flexibility under in case there's someone gets hurt, and you have to cut like the new kid from the Bucks and sign like someone to a 10-day not 10-day but like a minimum for the rest of the year.
Right.
Usually want to allow for like a little room under the tax just in case. So if you're competing, fine. But again, like think about how I worded it. Like the Nets are probably going to give him whatever he gets from someone else is probably what they're taking off of what they owe him. So I don't know that like, oh, the Clippers are going to pay him 2 and someone else is going to pay him 1 is going to matter, because I think the 2 is probably going to come off the Nets and that's not a guarantee, and it's possible they just agree, okay, we'll just do whatever. We'll do 1 and then maybe he gets 2 from somewhere else. Once the buyout's done with the Nets, it's not like he can't go sign for more somewhere else. Yeah. So these are all things that the agents work out, that the teams work out. So this would be the Nets would be negotiating with him and his agent. They would give him permission to talk to other teams about getting a new home, which is probably what is happening right now. There was some talk. They were talking to the Cavs and the Clippers. And if we look over at the Cavs, I haven't crunched their changes, so I don't know exactly where they are. I know that they were over the tax a little bit, but
a bit of a fluid situation about 24 hours away from the trade deadline.
Yeah, like they have LeVert gone and Niang gone, so that's like 25 million out, and they brought in DeAndre Hunter at 22. I'd have to double check if they made any other moves that I'm not looking at. I'll pull that up real quick. There's just not enough human time to crunch this stuff. But yeah, I have them under the tax, it looks like. So
further than the Clippers would be?
Let's take a look. So Cleveland is This is a rough number. No, they're about the same. They're at 1.5 under the tax.
Okay.
But again, this is without me auditing to make sure I'm doing this 100%. And I have to look at like DeAndre Hunter's incentives because he has certain incentives, and if maybe that could change his numbers a little bit. But let's just estimate that it's 1.5. So like they're both in the same ballpark. I don't really think it's going to be a matter of who pays Ben Simmons more. I could be wrong, but it's more of just like who's going to give him the most opportunity to play.
Right.
I think that's it. And I would argue that's the Clippers over the Cavs, because the Cavs are like super deep and they're not going to change their starting five at all. And then on top of that, if they change their starting five, it's because they're putting Hunter in. Right. If not, he's coming off the bench. I don't know. I don't know about that. And then when you look at like the Clippers, it's really, it'd be after Zubats. You probably play Ben Simmons at center, and
Coach Lou likes small ball, so
yeah. Well, Ben is a small ball center. He doesn't space the floor at all. Like he won't shoot.
No, you need four guys next to him that can shoot.
But he's a good defender. He's a big body. He moves the ball exceptionally well. And it'd be cheap for the rest of the year, and you don't have to worry about some big investment in case he has some injuries. And it lets Eubanks be what he is, which is like when you need an energy guy to come in and just run around and be tough and strong and physical, but not very skilled. So
it comes down to more of playing opportunity than a significant difference in the amount of money the Cavs and the Clippers could offer him, basically.
You can argue that like if he wants to piggyback on a team that has a championship aspiration, that it looks like the Cavs are closer than the Clippers just by the performance this year.
Yeah.
Clipper fans may not agree. It's from Ben Simmons' point of view. If he looks at the standings and look at what the Cavs have done and what the Clippers have done, he'll say, oh, the Clippers have been good. And he'll say the Cavs have been great. And that's okay. That's his decision. He's going to make that from his point of view. Or he may say, I want to partner up with the Clippers, who have one of the wealthiest owners in the league, and this is an organization that would be good to tie myself to. And also the Cavs are heavily invested in their future. They're paying Garland, Mitchell, Allen, Mobley a ton of money. And the Clippers really don't have that kind of long-term investment. Obviously, next year they're paying Kawhi and they're paying Powell and Bogey and Zoo, but these are all much better numbers. And then Harden, he has a player option of 36. He'll either opt in or he'll opt out and resign or possibly leave. But assuming he's back, it's still not the same kind of long-term investment that at least Ben Simmons could look at this and say, I have more of an earning opportunity here with the Clippers long term than I would with the Cavaliers. That's my evaluation. Where they are and where Ben Simmons is and those relationships that go into this decision, that's beyond me. He may know somebody on the Cavs that he grew up with, that he's in love, close relationship with, or it might be that
he's the anti-Joe Kim Noah. He wants to come to Cleveland.
I mean, I've never been. I don't think I've ever been to Cleveland. I was supposed to go to that All-Star game, but I missed that one. So, I mean, I've heard it's nice. Never been.
Yeah, so. They got a nice ball club right now.
I mean, LA is pretty nice. So.
LA is real nice. Intuit Dome's real nice. Steve Ballmer's your owner's real nice. Let's talk a little bit more of the future, because you bring up this summer. Could you ballpark a little bit of how much money they would have if James Harden opts in versus opting out to play with this summer, the Clippers?
Well, the initial question would be, obviously it's Harden. If he opts in, they're at about 173 in salary. So to just give you some names, that's Kawhi, James, Powell, Zoo, Bogey, DJJ, Dunn. Assuming they're keeping Eubanks for now, Batum, who has a player option, Kobe, and Cam Christie. Plus, they have what I believe will be the first-round pick from the Thunder. So you're talking about 30 or 29, okay?
Yeah.
So that is 12 right there. I need to just double-check if they ended up with a first, because I haven't processed picks yet. I was literally at the game last night, and then I got home, and I was like, you know what? I'm going to bed.
When in doubt, just assume they don't have a first.
The Clippers got Minnesota, so the Clippers did get a first. So now you plug in a first, and a Minnesota first is in the 18-20 range, something like that, give or take.
You're saying for
22.
this upcoming draft?
Yeah, they got that from Atlanta. Yeah, that was one of the picks that should have come over for Bogey.
A first or a second?
I'm sorry, I'm saying first, but I mean
Okay.
the second. I mean the second.
People might be freaking out for a second. Sorry. Clippers, I got an extra first.
No. My bad.
All good.
They have a first. They have the Thunder first, most likely.
Right.
They have, my apologies, the Minnesota second is what they got from Atlanta.
Okay.
And so as you plug that in there, that would be another roster spot of about 1.2 million. So that puts them potentially. So if James left, and I know there might be some Harden fans. This is just evaluation of the math here.
Yeah.
And if they let Drew go outright and Batum opted out, which I wouldn't expect, but let's say all that happened, you could technically get Batum to opt out and then promise that you'll re-sign him with the room exception. So let's say Batum did opt out, which I think is feasible in that theoretical possibility. They would have 23 million in cap room without James. Now, when you start going down the list of top free agents, it's not a great list.
Yeah.
You're probably not going to make a run at like a Kuminga and get him at that kind of money. But we could probably come up with some names that you can argue. Are any of them going to be as impactful as James Harden that they can get? Probably not.
Yeah.
I would pencil them in. I think that like the Clippers for now are looking at running through Kawhi's contract with James, and maybe that means 2 more years. Maybe it doesn't. But I could see this team being who they are in some facsimile for this year, obviously, the rest of this year, and next year, and then start to make some more difficult decisions the year after, whether that means trading guys, whether that means letting them expire, all those kind of questions. So I could see James back on another couple years. Similar to what the Warriors are doing, where they have guys lining up to Steph's contract. The Clippers probably line everything up with Kawhi's contract. And then, and you could say, well, like Zubats goes longer. Well, fine. Like, it's good to have a nice center for any team you bring in. And if you brought in, like, if your next star was a center, you could always trade Zubats in that kind of deal. So, running that in mind, if you bring back James, and let's say he opts in, so now, again, that was 20-ish million if he opted out. The opposite is that he opts in. Now you're at 173, and that's including keeping Eubanks and Batum, and just assuming that you have the exact team back. And then when you start to plug in names like, let me plug in here the draft pick. This is the min second. My bad.
And if it's 173, is that still under the first apron?
Well, it's even under the tax right now. So I have the 11 players we named plus 2 more, which was the OKC first, which is about 30, 29, and then Minnesota, which is about 50. So 20th into the second round. And then you have a vet min, and that's like 14 players. That puts them at about 11 under the tax. So to get out of repeater tax, you need to be out 2 years of the last. Basically, you need to dip out for 2 years. So there could be an argument that the Clippers hold the year and maybe get another player for anywhere between $8-10 million and stay under the tax. That's a viable path. So you don't have to keep Eubanks. There are different ways that they could go, but if they're good enough to have a nice playoff run, and this is missing Amir Coffey, by the way. So let's say that you plug in Amir at let's just put him in at 8.5. And I don't know what he's going to get, but we're just going to plug him in.
It's like about double what he's getting right now.
Yeah, let's just plug him in at 8.5. And this is the mid-level exception is about 14. It's assuming that a team is not giving him a full mid-level. Most teams don't give out full mid-levels. They give out partials. Every so often that might be the case. But let's say 8.5. And now you've got 15 players. It's the ones that we named. It's the 2 picks. It's a vet min. And it's Amir Coffey at 8.5. Now you're about $2.5 million under the tax. What that does is it resets the repeater, and then as they start to go into the future, they can go into the tax and not have to worry as much about getting those extra penalties. Repeater tax didn't matter as much in the past. If you're over by 10 million, you pay a 10 million fine. But now, starting next year, if you're over by 10, you pay a $20 million fine. They doubled the repeater tax. And so While, again, if you have the richest owner in the league and he doesn't care, then it doesn't matter. But that they got under the tax this year suggests that they're operating their team like how any NBA team would probably operate, where you're a good team, you don't have a path to being suddenly elite, so there's no reason to not get out of the tax. And that's not me criticizing the Clippers. The record is what the record is. They're a good team. They're better than most teams. Are they the top team in the league? No. Could they be at the end of the year in the playoffs? Of course. If they get there and have a great playoff, they could win the whole thing. But just projection, they don't appear to be the best team in the league, and they're not spending to go right now deep into the tax further to do so because there was no real reason to, and they still improved. If you like Bogdanovich over Man. If you don't, and this is a bad day for you, I'm sorry to hear that. But I do think it was a reasonable move.
Lastly here then, Eric, with your expertise, how would you assess what seems to be the Clippers' game plan moving forward, which is having an eye on the future, but also trying to be competitive in the present? And hey, if Kawhi Leonard's healthy in a 7-game series, anything could happen with this group that has the second best defense in the league.
Well, I think that the Clippers, for one, you have a lot going for you in that you have an owner who's very eager, and there's a lot of teams that you look at and you go, what the hell are they doing? And it's not just the GMs, right? You can blame Lawrence Frank. You go Rob Pelinka, you go down Nico Harrison and start going GM or top executive. And it's easy to give them all the flowers for the team's success and all the hate for the team's perceived failures. And most of the time, they're middlemen or there should be, there are no active women in that role at this time. So I would like to say middle person, but we're not quite there yet. Lawrence Frank is good at what he does, but ultimately he's the middleman. And I would say that's not an insult. I would say that to his face, and he'd probably agree on some level that ultimately you're servicing the ownership of the team, and that is Steve Ballmer, who gives them tremendous resources. So right off the bat, I've seen nothing to say like Ballmer doesn't know what he's doing or he's meddling in a way that makes me uncomfortable. Like he has no idea what he's doing and he's forcing them to make terrible moves. I don't have that perception, and I could point at other teams and say, yeah, there's a 10, 15-year track record of this team making moves that make no sense to me. At some point, they've gone through different executives. At some point, you got to point at the owner and say, the owner probably is meddling. And then I do some research and I say, yeah, the owner is, intrusive. So that's that. You have a beautiful building. It's a beautiful city. Some people love LA. Most people love LA. Those who don't, okay, not everyone's going to love it. But I think by and large, it's a destination city. So you have all that going for you. You have a great coach in Ty Lue, well respected. Most people around the league view him as one of the better tacticians. He's not like he's a little gruff in his personality, which I think is a good thing. You need someone who's demanding of players and holds them accountable. Darvin Ham is a sweetheart, one of the sweetest guys, right? But I think JJ, who I don't think is a sweetheart, is a better coach because of the discipline he demands. And I view Ty as somebody who, like, yeah, he's cool, but like you don't mess around. Like if Lou is telling you to do something forcefully, you're going to probably do it as a player because he's not a pushover, and I respect that. So from all of those things, then you have to decide, well, what's the future with your two stars being older? And the reality is you probably have a limit to how successful you're going to be with Kawhi and James at this point. So they have to transition out. And so if that's the assumption, I start to work backwards. That's how I think. Okay, if they're exiting, when are they exiting? How are they exiting? And how do you get to that? That's when I work with a lot of young people with teams who are just getting their career started, and I try to teach that formula. Yes, you'd love to have somebody forever and assume that they're the best forever, but unfortunately, we all age, as my hairline will tell you, and a few other things. So it's, but the reality is they probably need to start going that direction. Powell's over 30, Bogdanovich's over 30, Zoo is in the 28, 29 range. So I don't know who on this team is like a must. Like you have to be on this team in 3 years. And I don't know that there is one. And so if we look at the Lakers, who has to be on the Lakers in 3 years? It'd be Luka. It would not be LeBron, which is crazy, but like that's where you're at. And that they achieved that now is, credit to them. So then it's really just how can the Clippers go out and get that? And that's really the question. So there's cap room. There's trade. They don't have a ton of material to trade. They have 2031. They have some pick swaps,
How
but
many
they're not
firsts could
great.
open up after this year for them?
Well, so they owe 2029, 4 through 30 to Philadelphia, right? Or is it a swap? No, it's a swap. So they have a swap in 29. They owe it outright in 28. So they can trade 2030 and 2032. They have what's called the Stepien rule where you can't trade.
Yeah.
You have to have a first every other year.
Yeah.
And it can't be a maybe. There can't be like, oh, you might have it, but it might go to something. No, you have to 100% have a first in every other draft. So they can trade. So again, we're not talking about today. We might not be talking about tomorrow, meaning next season. We might be talking about like the trade deadline, next trade deadline. We might be talking about 26, 27 free agency. And that might be where you're making a trade. And at that point, you've got a couple of firsts to send, along with whatever else you collect, maybe a few young players, maybe some good vets, maybe Zubats at that point, and you're trading him to a team that's a little more established, that needs a center who's at this point over 30 or around 30. So I don't know what the Clippers are going to be. I just know that they're starting to situate themselves for that future. And I think that like I said, with Steph, they've got 2 years left. Kawhi is on the same timeline as Steph Curry. And I don't think that this relationship goes past that. And I've been wrong before, but I think that's a reasonably safe bet. So, but I do like where the Clippers are. I think they adapted to the new CBA rules pretty well. The Clippers were guilty, along with the Warriors, of spending at a rate that wasn't sustainable for the NBA. And all players last year lost 5% of their money because of teams like the Clippers and the Warriors. And that's just the way that, it's just they split up the money 50%. Players get 50% of the income. If 10 billion comes in, the players get 5. And if teams like the Clippers and the Warriors are overspending, it throws everything out of whack. And they needed to curb that. So it's not like, oh, get more owners like Ballmer who are willing to spend. You do that, you only compound the problem, because now players are not getting, they get 10% of their money withheld all year, and then they get back the difference. They didn't get back all their money. So if I say to you, you're going to make $10 an hour, but I pay you $9 an hour, or $15 an hour, or $20 an hour, whatever, but I'm paying you $18 an hour or $19 an hour, and you look at your stub and you're like, well, that sucks. What happened here? And now you add a bunch of zeros. And while from a big point of view, it's great. Like it works out in the end. If you think about it, like, yeah, the players and the teams the money works out over 5-10 years. It averages out. They figure it out. That doesn't do great for a player who has a 2, 3, 4-year career, who this is their only chance to earn. So it's very complex. I like where the Clippers are. I think they've got flexibility where they don't have to absolutely bottom out. There's no reason for them to bottom out the next couple of years. You can argue that, there's always an argument that maybe a team should bottom out, but the process of bottoming out is not like it's very rare when it's a 1-year dip into the draft, because you have to do it in the right year. Yeah. You have to hope that player is, mentally, physically healthy and the right guy to be a leader of a team. And you just might get a draft where it's just not that guy, or you might get the wrong number. You might get the number 3 and the number 2 is the guy. Or you get the number 1 and you get the perfect guy, but then they get hurt. Yeah. And their career is never the same. So you kind of need multiple bites at that apple, and it usually takes 2-3 years of being really, really, really awful. And Clipper fans have gone through that a long time ago. I was around for some of that, and it's not fun. And I do think they've done a really good job of minimizing their down years.
But they've had 13 straight winning seasons.
Yeah, it's even the year where like they had Shea, and that team wasn't supposed to be much. That was a fun year, and that was a fun team. And like Gallinari and whatnot, those guys played hard.
Sweet Lou.
So yeah, I don't think they're bottoming out anytime soon. I don't think they want to go that way, and I don't know that they have to go that way. But it's harder. Well, it's not harder, because losing 3-4 years in a row and being absolutely terrible is hard too. So,
but they are threading a needle to a degree, balancing things.
Yeah. I mean, that's there are teams that are going to do that and succeed, and there are teams that they're more likely to be mediocre for longer, but I suggest fans to enjoy as long as you have like the Drew Eubanks types who are playing hard and care. It's a lot easier to watch a mediocre team that's growing and that's fighting, and yeah, you're not winning every year at the highest level. I enjoy that personally a little bit more. I don't mind the bottoming out if you've got like two or three really young, fun guys who are going to be great. When it was like, shoot, Q and Darius and all those years where Corey Maggette, all those guys, I was around for all of that, and like those were fun years. Even though the team, Piakowski might have been their, one of their best players. Those were fun. They would lose, and like if they were up five, I would always say that like if the Clippers were up by, they had to be up by 5 with 5 minutes left, or more than 5, because if they were up by 5 with 5 minutes left back in the day, they would always lose that 5-point lead. It was 5 points with 5 meant they were down by about 3. And it was fun to watch. But like, they've done a lot from where they were. And, to go back and just to wrap up my point on the ownership thing, like they did have the wrong ownership back then and they don't have that now. So a lot of the failures of the past that made the Clippers what they were, which was, they weren't a serious organization at the time. And, that's just not the case, and it hasn't been the case for a long time. So I don't think that's going to be anything that keeps people away from joining this team if it's a good opportunity.
I always say, well, if ownership is the biggest advantage in sports, the Clippers were at a disadvantage for about 40 years, and they've only been, a real franchise going for it since Steve Ballmer took over just about 10 years ago. Lastly, because you brought it up, I'm sorry, I got to sneak in one more question here. I need your perspective on what the hell the Dallas Mavericks were thinking trading Luka Doncic. Sure. Is there anything that people are missing when it comes to the numbers and them looking ahead and saying, we just don't want to pay this guy and we're getting out now?
Yeah. What's the best way to put it? So I don't like to say that people are lying. I would say that people tell the truth from their perspective. I would say that there's a lot more that go into these things. If you feel like something isn't right, it's probably not the story that they're pitching. The Lakers can't pitch any other story. Luka isn't going to pitch any other story. They're not going to do anything that would get them in trouble for any sort of behind-the-scenes negotiations that might have happened. Because if there was any anyone suspecting, any other team, whatever, suspecting that there was anything done between the Lakers and Luka before that in communication, there would be an investigation. The NBA people would have problems with that. The league does not control this sort of thing. So the conspiracy theories that the league wants this and made this happen is nonsense, because it's like the league can't go into your home and say, you need to sell your house.
Yeah.
Right?
Why would Nico Harrison sign on? What does he get out of it?
Yeah. And the most obvious flag on their story that doesn't hold up is why wouldn't they have gotten everything that the Lakers have to offer? Especially because the Lakers historically have overpaid for stars. So like you look at what they gave for the AD trade, they gave every single thing that they had except Kyle Kuzma, right? So like if in this trade, they probably should have given everything they had but Austin Reeves. That means probably the 2031 first, Dalton Connect. And if Dallas had all the leverage in the world because they came to the Lakers and said, let's do this because we want AD and you can have Luka, then if they had the leverage that they supposedly had, why didn't they get that? And Rob Pelinka will take credit for telling them no, but like, did he say no, thank you, or please, or like, that's not how deals work. Like, what leverage did he? Oh, well, because there's no guarantee that Luka's going to commit. That's nonsense. And I mean, yeah, Rob has to say that because it's totally true from a legal point of view. If they in any way suggest that they knew that Luka was going to stay long term, then they're going to be facing some real investigation. So that's what you're supposed to say. Bill Duffy, who's the agent of Luka, is an old school guy. He's not a modern agent who's going to fight his battles through the media. He's not going to make sure that his players' point of views are known. You see, like Bernie Lee, who's a good friend, a great agent, a little more newer school, fighting his battles with Shams and whatever on Jimmy on Twitter and whatnot. Rich Paul, who's done tremendous things with his career and started basically from nothing, is someone who's going to fight his battles in public. He's going
You
to
remember when everybody made fun of LeBron and his crew and him bringing all his guys along with him and how's this going to work out? Seems like it worked out.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of cases where it doesn't, but like LeBron has a lot of really smart, capable people with him. All right. So what does that tell you about LeBron? He's not a frivolous person. He's not just taking guys along with him who are there for the ride. And like that is a challenging part of being in the NBA, coming from a place of either not being wealthy, and in a lot of cases coming from poverty, where there are people that you bring along with you and they are draining and not adding to your livelihood and your career. And credit to LeBron for the people that his picker and who he chooses to be around and to partner with has been superb. And so he's one of the most successful athletes of all time. And Rich Paul is one of the most successful agents. And it's not because of, it's influenced by LeBron, and having LeBron as a client has certainly made that easier. But some of the shrewd ways they approach things and the ruthlessness of which he does, which I respect and don't, that's not a negative. I will just say that Bill Duffy has an older style and isn't going to fight those battles in public like a Rich Paul would. So we're not going to get the true story, if there is a different story, out of Luka and his agent. Whereas on the Rich Paul stuff, whether it's true or not, we're not getting their point of view. We would get, if he represent Luka and Matt Dallas came out saying what they said about Luka, then guaranteed Rich Paul or Stephen A. Smith,
burn it down.
All these people would be going at Dallas, and it'd be a whole different thing. So again, I have my theories. I'm not going to get too deep into it, other than to say that something doesn't add up. I have information that I believe from my experience that suggests that it's not what they are portraying. But I don't think that anyone I don't think anyone on the Lakers or the Mavericks, I'm sorry, the Lakers or Luka's side have any benefit in setting any record straight. It doesn't help them in any way. Let Dallas, I feel like Dallas traded for the right to spin the story. And that's fine. That's fine. Let them spin the story. If Mark Cuban was still owning the team, Luka wants to be there for his whole career. And there's no way Dallas ever trades him. I mean, obviously, like if he gets to be 40 years old or 35, I'm saying like in his prime, there's no way that Mark Cuban trades him. There's no way that relationship disintegrates like it did. So, new ownership. We talked about that pretty deeply, about the pro of the Bomber is that you don't have new ownership in Dallas that has different, they're very politically active in areas that probably run counter to the narratives and the points of views and the politics of NBA players. And so, I don't like to get into politics, so, leave that as it is. But it does matter in some of these cases where, like, who are you partnering with? And if you're going for Mark Cuban, who you absolutely believe in and trust, and who babied Luka and took care of Luka probably too much in terms of, like, discipline and whatnot, and letting Luka be, the absolute biggest star and let him do whatever. But is that right or wrong? I don't know. I know the Lakers gave Kobe too much, and they gave LeBron too much, and that's who they are and that's who they've been. So he's in the right place for a team that is going to baby their star. Yeah. I mean, not that, like, we can get into the debate of whether the Clippers have babied Kawhi or not. That's a whole different question. But we'll save that for another time.
He is Eric Pincus. Eric Pincus and his brain. Of course, he's the general manager of Sports Business Classroom. Also writes for the Bleacher Report. He's an NBA capologist. You've seen him on NBA TV. It's good to see him here on Clippers Talk the day after the trade deadline. Eric, my friend, always appreciate you. You know that. Thanks for doing this here today.
All right, Adam. Anytime. Thanks for having me.
Quite the interesting interview there, guys. I hope you enjoyed that. It seemed like a lot of people were joining. I love Eric Pincus. Known him for some time. He's been coming on with me and Kevin Figures on the AM570 LA Sports on the FNA podcast for quite some time. So I wanted to pick his brain when it came to the Clippers cap situation, moves made. His analysis is as good as his capology knowledge. So really cool to have him on. There is some more I want to talk about in this episode. I know later on tonight we got clips and dip for you with Chuck Mockler and Will Updike. But I wanted to discuss a little bit of some of the rumblings I'm hearing from people talking about Kawhi Leonard and how he has looked specifically over the last 3 games, where he hasn't shot it particularly well and he hasn't moved well. As a whole, there have been moments. I thought the dunk with the left hand last night, I went back and just watched that before doing this episode a couple more times. I'm like, okay, he looked pretty explosive there early on in the game. He had pop. He had 8 points in the first quarter, and he had 11 in the fourth quarter when he got more aggressive, when he played the first 10 minutes of the fourth, as the Clippers were trying to hang in there, and they led by 5, and they let that game get away from them, a 19-7 run in the fourth quarter. But I'm always fascinated with players coming back off of injuries and where they're at and how long it could take to get back to playing at an elite level, or if a guy has lost a step or not. This is something I've been monitoring my whole life because most of my favorite players have always gotten hurt, unfortunately. It's great. I got a black cat who is that is fur over over the webcam. That black cat right there is from Tuca. It's like a black cat's been walking in front of my teams for a long time, so I figure I'd just get one at this point, I guess. Oh my God. It's amazing how perfectly dark that is, Tuca. Pigmentation there is spot on. You are confirmed a black cat here. You gave us the black cat on the web. Now the paw is just on it. Tuca, would you this is what I'm dealing with, guys. This is it. Oh my goodness. And the entire interview, Tuca's been trying to disrupt things while Eric Pincus is waxing poetically about the salary cap and the Clippers. But so I am really invested when it comes to this conversation, especially about Kawhi Leonard. Because what's been interesting about Kawhi is whenever he has come back, whether it is the quadriceps injury with the Spurs, whether it's been the ACL with the Clippers, the meniscus, and now he's dealing with the swelling, and TBD how or if he can get back to being a top 5 player in the league. But so far, up until this point, whenever Kawhi has come back, he has come back better. Offensively. Defensively, you can debate that. Spit it out, Austin. You can debate that whether or not he's giving the same amount of effort on the defensive end or if he can do some of the same things he used to do. I would say it's more about having more of an offensive responsibility, and you can't do it all. You can't give 100% all the time on both ends when you're the number one option on the offensive end. There's really no guys that can do that. There's going to be some lapses defensively. The question is whether or not it's all still there with Kawhi. So I've been watching very closely over the last 3 games. You know, I've seen every possession with him as a Clipper, but over the last 3 games, he's looked tired at times. And I hope that's what it is. I hope that's what it is. And I think there's a lot of logic to it just being that with Kawhi Leonard. And I'll point out how last night he played almost 34 minutes. So he's been in this ramp-up process. Last night was game 13 for him this season, where they said it's going to basically be like his preseason, the first few games. And Lawrence Frank said something to the effect of, this is Kawhi Leonard last step of the rehab, basically playing games, the final step, something along those lines. And I don't know at what point he moved out of that phase to just being, you know, a player that didn't have a training camp, that's early in the season now, and is still getting his win back. But last night he did play the most minutes he's played in a game this season, just about 34, and played, I think, the first 10 minutes of the fourth quarter. They needed him to, and a lot of the run happened when he came off the court. But I am wondering if how Kawhi has looked so far over the last 3 games, especially with him looking a little bit lethargic out there. Is this about he hasn't stepped on the gas yet? He hasn't really gone full throttle yet? Or is it because he's tried to, and this is just what he has left? Now, I believe it's the former. And my logic for that is just going back to how Kawhi has looked. If you look back at the game log when he was coming off the ACL, it took time. It took like at least a month of games before he really was, okay, turning the corner by January. And I know he had a couple of other injuries. He had a setback with the ACL. He had stiffness. Then he rolled his ankle. So it took longer. But by January, I think he was averaging 27 a game again. But we're talking, I don't know, 15 games in, maybe a little bit more than that. And there was a ramp up then when it came to minutes too. He started slow. He started slow last season, and I was really monitoring his movement, his explosiveness or lack thereof early on. And I remember the game against Denver where they lost to a team that didn't have Jokic, that didn't have, I think, Michael Porter Jr. and Jamal Murray. It was the worst loss of the season last year, where they got beat by Denver, and it was DJ and Reggie Jackson who were tearing them up in the pick and roll late in that game. And Kawhi tried to turn it on, and he couldn't save them. But then, I think it was the very next game in Sacramento where he had that dunk on JaVale McGee. And that was the point from that game through the next 30 where he set the all-time efficiency record for shooting splits over a 30-game stretch in NBA history. He went from looking like, man, is Kawhi kind of looking washed out there as he lost a step or two, to basically playing the best regular season basketball of his career. I don't think there's any basically about it. I think it's confirmed. He was shooting 57, 52, 92 splits over 30 games. It was insane after starting slow. Now, he did have a training camp, unlike this year. Is that what's been holding him back? Is he just being more hesitant out there and not stepping on the gas because he said we're on nobody else's timeline and this is what it's going to be? It's going to be a process, and it could be a slow one. I don't think he necessarily said that. I'm just going off of the amount of minutes they've given him and how they've gone up, because he's looked more tired as of late. So there's a lot of different variables here. Is it because he's starting to play more minutes? Is it because now he's 13 games in and has been playing about every other day? And so is that second win coming from him as he stabilizes with minutes? Like he almost got to 34 last night. So Coach Lou was asked about, is that his new minutes restriction right around there? Because he's talked about getting him to 36, which is basically, he's back then. And how long will he be at 34? And Coach Lou said, we'll see, I think. So if he gets, a string of a week or two playing 34 minutes a night, does he get his win back then for playing that many minutes? And therefore, we will see Kawhi Leonard with quicker movements out there, with more explosiveness, and getting back to close to the guy he was last season when he was on that tear. Does he still have that version of Kawhi in him? I think you have to give it a little bit of time. I don't think, because of his track record of coming back slowly, that you can say definitively, okay, he's not the same player anymore 13 games in, when he's been on this progressive incremental minutes increase. I think that's not very prudent considering the evidence we've had in the past. Now, he is a year older now, and there is going to come a time where Kawhi Leonard comes back from an injury or comes back for the next season and doesn't look as good, doesn't look like somebody that can be a top 5 player on any given night. There's going to come a time where that happens. Is that happening now? Or is this just somebody that's going through the steps of the ramp up and isn't pushing things yet, isn't stepping on the gas and accelerating like maybe he can, he's just not doing it yet? Because that's how it's been before with him. Where once he feels comfortable, he takes off. Like I said, off the ACL, by January, that 22-23 season, he was averaging 27 points a game again. But it took a while. And there were games where he looked better than others, but it wasn't consistent until January, where it was full-fledged Kawhi. Now, the most points he's had in a game so far this season is 27. And that was game 2 after his minutes got to 28. He started off at 21 or 20, then he got to 24, then about 28, and then last night He was almost at 34 minutes. That was the game in San Antonio, where it did look like he had a little extra oomph out there. Maybe something for his former squad. And I said then that basically I'm convinced last year's version of Kawhi is still there after that game. It wasn't just because of that game, but what I had seen so far, the movement was really impressive. I thought he was ahead of schedule, if anything, early on. Now it feels like he's a little bit behind because the last 3 games where he scored 14 points on 6 of 18 shooting against Toronto, just 11 points on 4 of 11 shooting against the Lakers after he was much better the first game against them with 19 on 9 of 13 shooting. And then Indiana last night, he has 19 points, 7 of 16 shooting. So he's been shooting the last 3 games, 38% from the field. He is at 39% from 3 over that time. And that's really just because last night he went 3 of 6 from 3. Is this just naturally you have down periods during the season, but because we haven't seen him get all the way up yet to where we accept some of these down games that are going to happen, ruts, shooting ruts, it makes us a little bit more worrisome because we haven't seen him go all the way up yet and have a 30-point game or have a string of them to where then, okay, you have a couple bad games, whatever, it's there. I think that's what has people a little bit on edge with how he's looked so far. But I'm going to give it more time because I remember people saying the exact same stuff last season. I remember when he first came back from the ACL. I remember his first year with the Clippers because remember, he's coming off a knee injury that he played through and won the championship in the NBA Finals anyways with Toronto. I remember people then saying, oh, the Clippers got Wizards MJ. His first year before the ACL and everything. People have been critical of Kawhi and saying, oh, he's moving, he's stuck in mud, he's slower. And then he always finds the switch. Is it still there? Is the question at 33 with another knee injury, but there was no structural damage. It was just swelling. So you would think he did have a surgery, though, still. We don't know what that included. Cleanup, whatever that means. But you would think this was the lesser of the issues compared to ACL or meniscus. So should he really be that different than he was last season? I'm still hopeful that we just need more games, more evidence, and it's just his body adjusting to more minutes. So if he can get a couple more games underneath him, and hopefully, as I always say, and as Kawhi's pointed out, he's basically day-to-day at this point. Hopefully he's ready to go and not on the injury report for tomorrow's game against Utah, and there hasn't been any swelling. He took a really tough fall in the second half of that game last night, and I took note of it. He went for the reverse layup. This was after they challenged a foul on Siakam, and it was overturned, and then the Clippers won the jump, and then he went for a reverse layup. They did call a foul. He went to the line, but he fell pretty hard, and I saw him shaking his right leg a little bit. Not trying to say sky's falling or sounding alarm bells. I just saw that happen. I watch every fall with Kawhi, of course. So, I'm always watching the injury report. And if he's good to go tomorrow, great. Coach Lou says stack days, put them together, stat games, and that's all positive. He said afterwards he felt good in the locker room. He's been feeling good. But is this just the body hasn't caught up to the minutes yet? His lungs, his air, his wind. I think that's likely. I do. I think it's more likely that than he's just washed now because of what we've seen in the past. Yes, he's older. He's 33, but he's not that far removed from being the best regular season version of himself just this last year. Like, it hasn't even been a year because he was playing like that, through February last year before he went out in March, late March. So I'm not going to be overly concerned yet, but I'm monitoring the situation as I always would with Kawhi. So for everybody that is panicking right now, I would say wait for more games to come in because we've seen this before. Going back to his first year as a Clipper, going back to him first coming back off the ACL, going back to first coming back off the meniscus last year. I think it's still there. Time will tell with Kawhi and his movement, and specifically explosive movements out there. And he had 11 points in the fourth quarter. And made some moves where we went past Siakam. He got to a floater early in the fourth. And a lot of these shots, typically people say, oh, everything's short. He doesn't have his legs. A lot of them have been long, I've noticed. And he's getting the same looks that he normally makes. I hope it's just Kawhi is sighting the scope right now. He's fine-tuning his shot. And then he gets to that point where there's just nothing you can do. Hand in his face. He sees right through it. He's knocking down every mid-range. That's my hope. We'll see. Clippers taking on the Utah Jazz tomorrow night. It's an early season must-win game after losing the last three. Utah, worst team, I believe, in the Western Conference. They might have the worst record in the league. We'll talk about that on Clips and Dip and preview that game a little bit later tonight. But it's a big one tomorrow night. The Clippers have to figure it out. Coach Lue was less upset after last night's game versus the Lakers game. He thought they had the right intent last night, but they did have some really bad turnovers you don't normally see. I mean, 6 straight, even for this Clippers team that does turn the ball over a lot. 6 straight turnovers, and the way they happened, that's some pretty wonky stuff that is not sustainable. But it was bad. It was ugly. It was extremely disappointing to see them blow a game where they're up 22. Coach Lue definitely isn't pushing the panic button coming off of last night. He seemed to be more encouraged by that performance than what happened against the Lakers, and that makes sense. They were up big. How much of that was just they hit 10 effing three-pointers in the first quarter, and 11 is the record for most three-pointers made in NBA history in a quarter. It also happened against them this year. Boston. The game in Boston. Yeah. All right. Appreciate everyone, especially Eric Pincus, for coming in here. He's a friend. He's a really good guy. He's been coming on with me for so long. Before we get out, I do want to remind you that Clippers Talk is brought to you by Underdog Fantasy. Underdog Fantasy is the easiest way to play fantasy sports, and it's available in over 30 states. All you got to do is pick higher or lower on your favorite player stats, or if you're hating on a guy, you can pick lower. You can always pick lower, your least favorite player. But you can win up to 100 times your money. Make picks, win money. I got a free promo code for you guys that gives new users a free pick and up to $1,000 in bonus cash. The promo code is LAC, and you can find it below in the referral link in this very episode here on YouTube. Then all you do is go to underdogfantasy.com. You can click on NBA and pick higher or lower when it comes to players' points or points, rebounds, and assists. There are a lot of different options for you. For example, I will check on some games tonight here on Underdog Fantasy. You got San Antonio in Charlotte. Higher or lower than 24.5 points for Victor Wembanyama. I'm going higher. Maybe they're accounting for the fact that San Antonio might beat him up something good, and he might not play enough to get to 30 points. But I would go higher than 24.5. LaMelo Ball, higher or lower than 25.5 points, or higher or lower than 7.5 assists. Underdog Fantasy, make picks, win money. This has been 125 days straight of Clippers Talk here on the YouTube side. Please subscribe, like, tell your friends, hit the notification button. We had a good guest today in Eric Pincus. We had to switch some things around in the schedule because we were going to have Ricky G coach on. You may know him from X. He's got a basketball line that a lot of people like to get in and have conversations and debate with him on. He will be with us sometime early next week, I would guess, Ricky G. I'm Adam Moslin. You've been listening to Clippers Talk here at Clippers Talk on YouTube.